Yeah. Analytics off the chain, other channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game. I'm a headliner.
What is going on, Headliner Nation? Jake, Fantasy Headliners. Hopefully everybody's doing well out there. Today we're talking about quarterbacks. We're going to start and sit here for Week 16 fantasy football in the fantasy playoffs. And you know what? Can't be any more crazy than Week 15, right? I mean, who saw Tyler Huntley being the number one overall quarterback last week? Not a lot of people had him ranked number one in their rankings. That is for sure. But what's going to happen here this week before we get into all the matchups in Week 16? First, let's look how we did in Week 15. And I really wish the percentage was better. Out of the 28 quarterbacks we talked last week that completed their games this past weekend, 18 of them were correct for an accuracy percentage of 64%. Now, obviously, I want that number to be higher, but when Tom Brady and Dak Prescott and Kyler Murray are all out there struggling, really makes it hard to hit that higher number at the quarterback position because those guys are must-starts every single week. Some of the other bigger misses, Cam Newton, Jared Goff, or just talked about Tom Brady. Some of the bigger hits, though, had Mac Jones, Justin Fields, and then a lot of people were worried about Aaron Rodgers last week. Do not be worried about Aaron Rodgers. The discount double suck it tour is in full swing, and he only needs 9 toes, apparently. But now is the time that we move forward to Week 16. Who we starting, who we sitting, and we're going to kick it off here with Thursday Night Football, talking about the San Francisco 49ers and Tennessee Titans. And when it comes to this matchup, I got to be honest. I got to admit something. I like Jimmy G here once again this week. The guy has gone out there and scored at least 18 fantasy points now in 6 out of that last 8 games he's played, plus has a 10-3 touchdown to interception ratio over his last 6 games as well. San Francisco playing pretty good right now. They're winners of 5 out of their last 6, and Tennessee is way easier to throw on than they are to run on. They're allowing right now right around 18.5 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. Still an overall solid defense, though, as of late. They haven't allowed 200 yards passing in a game since Week 12. But with the likes of Deebo Samuel and George Kittle, along with that upside there, I'm going to start Jimmy G once again for Ryan Tannehill. Does he get A.J. Brown back? Can he have A.J. Brown and Julio back together again this week? I mean, Ian Rappaport has already come out and reported that A.J. Brown is likely to play here this week, which is great. Absolutely love that. Julio has already been a full participant in practice. Things are lining up to have an opportunity for Ryan Tannehill to finish the season strong. Now, San Francisco is also easier to throw on than they are to run on. But right now, we're kind of reliant on rushing touchdowns from Ryan Tannehill. That's kind of what's putting him over the hump here as of late because he's not doing it through the air. He has that rushing upside. If he gets A.J. Brown back along with Julio Jones, not exactly a bad start, however. As much as I think that he bounces back this week, when you look at the track record over the last few weeks, there's no consistency there to really give you that warm fuzzy on the inside. There's a lot of good quarterbacks here this week. Ryan Tannehill could very easily finish inside the top 12, but in my opinion, based off recent performance and still that unknown of how much do we really see of A.J. Brown and Julio Jones, it's got me kind of pausing for the cause, if you know what I mean. So as of right now, I'm playing a little bit safer. I'm going to sit Tannehill here once again. But just like in my running back video, it's time to hip thrust it over to Saturday football now with a matchup between the Cleveland Browns and Green Bay Packers. This one, in my opinion, kind of a no-brainer, right? Not something we're going to spend a whole lot of time on. We weren't starting Baker Mayfield when he was 100% healthy, when his teammates were 100% healthy, when they were at full strength, we weren't starting Baker Mayfield. So why would we do it with all the question marks right now? We know Austin Hooper could be back. We don't know about a lot of other people on this team, though. So in my opinion, going up against Green Bay, not risking it, going to sit Baker Mayfield. For Green Bay, it's confirmed. I mean, tell everybody, Aaron Rodgers only needs 9 toes to play football. He broke a toe a couple weeks ago, and the guy has actually gotten better. He's had 14 touchdowns over his last 4 games combined and no turnovers. He's literally playing the best football of the season right now in a matchup going up against Cleveland, who allows right around 17 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks, and their defense is missing a lot of guys, a lot of injuries, guys on the COVID IR. Perfect opportunity for Aaron Rodgers to go out there and discount double suck it once again this week. He's definitely going to be a start for me here in Week 16. But because 2 is always better than 1, we got another game here on Saturday. Talk about the Indianapolis Colts at the Arizona Cardinals. And what the hell has happened to not just the Arizona Cardinals, but Kyler Murray? Who's seen the original Space Jam movie? I'm not talking about that new stuff with LeBron. I'm talking about the original, the OG Space Jam. Didn't they go in there, the NBA players, and like suck out some of their talents and stuff? That's exactly what's happening in the NFL. Dak Prescott, Kyler Murray, heck, even Tom Brady last week. It's like somebody has sucked the talent out of these guys, and they're just struggling a lot more than they probably should be here over the last couple weeks. Now, Kyler, the guy's only got 1 touchdown over his last 2 games combined. The rushing upside, it's kind of slowed. He only had 3 rushing yards last week. 3. It's a lot easier to throw on Indianapolis than it is to run on them. They allow around 18 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks, but it's still Kyler Murray. You really can't risk sitting him because this guy can definitely win you your matchup all by himself. Plus, it's a playoff team. They need to get there together, if you know what I'm talking about. So they're going to have to try to let it all hang out here this week and try to get back into that winning grace. So I'm going to go ahead and start Kyler Murray here this week. For Indianapolis and Carson Wentz, they don't really need a whole lot from Carson Wentz, right? All they really need is Jonathan Taylor, and he's been more than enough here as of late. Carson Wentz hasn't thrown for more than 22 pass attempts in a game since last month. The guy's basically like on vacation right now. He only has 1 game since week 9, which he's thrown for multiple touchdowns. The Cardinals have been very vulnerable through the air here as of late. They've been torched. I mean, come on. The Detroit Lions are out there lighting them up in the secondary. I expect a little bit more of the same here. Look for Michael Pittman to have a better game. Maybe we see a little bit more in the passing game from Jonathan Taylor. I'm actually going to start myself some Carson Wentz here this week. But now, because I'm all loosened up and fresh and I'm pumped up for some Christmas cookies, let's go ahead and hip thrusted into Sunday football now, where we have the Detroit Lions and the Atlanta Falcons. Now, in this game, does Jared Goff even play? He's on the COVID IR, but he's vaccinated, so he could return. We just do not know here as of late, and he's been playing a little bit better. 25-plus fantasy points in 2 out of his last 3 games played. He's working the ball around to the likes of Amon-Ra St. Brown. I mean, that guy is out there on another level right this second, and Atlanta allows right around 18.5 fantasy points per game. But at this point of the season, do you want to risk starting Jared Goff in your fantasy playoffs? Unless you're in a 2-quarterback league, I'm really not considering it, and he's going to be a sit. As for Atlanta and Matt Ryan, it's just another one of those too risky, too inconsistent guys that I can't trust every single week. The guy hasn't had multiple touchdowns in a game since week 9. We were heading into week 16. That's quite a long time, and for some reason, they refuse to really pound the ball to Kyle Pitts in the red zone. I don't understand it. The guy's an athletic freak. Can't get red zone targets, so that is a problem. Detroit all of a sudden playing a little bit better. I guess they want to screw themselves out of a high draft pick. I don't know what it is, but for whatever reason, Matt Ryan is not worth the risk and is going to remain a sit this week. Now we head out to Cincinnati for the Ravens and the Bengals, and look at Tyler Huntley last week. Dude went off. I mean, who needs Lamar Jackson, right? Let's just roll with Tyler Huntley. He absolutely battled Aaron Rodgers for 4 quarters last week, finished quarterback 1 on the week overall in fantasy football. He's completed at least 70% of his passes in all 3 of his starts this year. The rushing upside is there. Just this last week had 13 carries for 73 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. But we know that if Lamar Jackson is starting, we don't sit him. So let's talk about what do we do if Lamar sits? Do we start Tyler Huntley? I mean, Cincinnati allows right around 17 fantasy points per game, and they've allowed at least 250 yards passing in 2 of their last 3. He's got the weapons to succeed. We know he logs on to Mark Andrews. Hollywood Brown had 10 targets. In my opinion, I'll start either of these guys. Whoever starts for the Baltimore Ravens, Lamar Jackson or Tyler Huntley, will be a start for me here this week. For Cincinnati and Joe Burrow, he's still kind of just stuck in this rut, right? He started the season with 8 straight games of at least 2+ passing touchdowns. Since that time span, he's only done it once now over the last 6 games. He absolutely torched the Baltimore Ravens, though, back in week 7, where he threw for 416 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception. He's had too many weapons at his disposal here over the last few weeks to put up, subpar numbers. The bounce back is coming, and this is a must-win for the Cincinnati Bengals to take over sole possession of first place. They're playing for something in Cincinnati, and I expect them to bring their A game, and that's why, once again, I'm going to start Joey B. Now we head up to Minnesota, where we freeze our balls off and talk about the Rams and the Vikings, which is also going to be my Manscaped matchup of the week. Just a quick reminder, even though we're super close to Christmas, head over to manscaped.com right now and find yourself something nice, fellas. There's tons of great deals all over the website to take care of whatever your needs may be. Use the promo code HEADLINERS at checkout so we can give you 20% off and free shipping. But back to this game, it's a couple of quarterbacks that just like to throw them TDs, if you know what I'm talking about. Matthew Stafford now has at least 2 passing touchdowns in 11 of the 14 games he's played this year. And come on, he's got Cooper Kupp, He's got Odell Beckham. He's got Van Jefferson, and a run game that's really not commanding a whole lot of attention right now in LA. They really need to continue to win in LA to put some pressure here on the playoff hunt. Minnesota allows right around 19 fantasy points per game, fourth most in the NFL. We're starting Matthew Stafford. For Cousins, a lot of the same can be said. Did you also know that Kirk Cousins himself has thrown for at least 2 passing touchdowns in 11 of the 14 games he's played this season? Plus, this week, he could have Adam Thielen back, fingers crossed, and that will only raise that ceiling. Sure, he may look bad at times. Dude last week had a throw. I don't know who the hell he was throwing it. It's like he was just trying to compete for who could throw the ball the farthest, because there was no offensive player in the general vicinity. LA allows right around 17 fantasy points per game, so the ceiling may be a little bit lower, but I'm still going to start Kirk Cousins. Now we head up to New England for the rematch of the Buffalo Bills and New England Patriots. And what are the chances that Mac Jones goes out and only has 3 pass attempts in this game against the Buffalo Bills? Probably slim to none, right? I mean, he's coming off a game in which he threw the ball 45 times, second highest total of the year. If you take away the Snowmageddon game that they had just a couple weeks ago, Mac Jones has been looking pretty good, right? Utilizing what he has, not trying to do too much, utilizing his tight ends. This is a different matchup, though, going up against Buffalo, who's very difficult against opposing quarterbacks. A lot easier to run on Buffalo than it is to throw on them. They've allowed only 150 yards passing one time over their last 5 games played. Now, Buffalo, they only give up right around 13.5 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. I like the rookie. I like Mac Jones. I think he's going to have a great career here in the NFL. But as for this week, Week 16 fantasy football playoffs in this matchup, just too risky. He's going to be a sit. As for Josh Allen, though, you never sit Josh Allen. Like, never, ever, ever sit Josh Allen. Even in the Snowmageddon game a couple weeks ago, he still scored like 14 fantasy points. New England, no easy task for opposing quarterbacks. They're ranked number 1 in the NFL against that position. But like I said, it's Josh Allen. The ceiling is too high. Plenty of weapons. He does have Cole Beasley, who will probably be out this week, which should limit maybe some of those short to intermediate throws. But maybe we get more Gabe Davis. I'm all for more Gabe Davis deep down the field. Hopefully he can break off a big one, really boost that ceiling for Josh Allen. And that's why I got to remain right here in the start column. Now we head up to New York for a battle of the Jags and the Jets. Yay. I don't know if anybody outside of these two cities are looking forward to this game, but it is a battle of the number 1 overall pick, Trevor Lawrence, against number 2 overall, Zach Wilson, going head-to-head here for the first time. Unfortunately, really the only number that these guys have in common is the number 0, because they've combined for 14 games so far this season with 0 passing touchdowns. Now, Zach Wilson, he's starting to show flashes of some improvement here lately, which is definitely something we're paying close attention to. But this is 2 bad teams with limited weapons, limited scoring opportunities, not a whole lot of touchdowns to go around. This is definitely something that you avoid in fantasy football. Both these guys going to be a sit. Now we go over to Philadelphia for the Giants and Eagles, and we know we're not starting Mike Glennon. Nobody in the fantasy playoffs is starting Mike Glennon here this week. But what about Jalen Hurts? He had himself a pretty good Week 15. Completed 76% of his passes. That's the highest percent he's had since Week 1. He's had the most pass attempts in a game since Week 4, and he really didn't run as much. He wasn't overly reliant on the rushing game until he got around the goal line. Then he's calling his own number and scoring touchdowns that way. Maybe there are some slight limitations with that ankle sprain that he suffered a couple weeks ago. But like I said, the goal line is still his. He's still mobile in the pocket, and maybe it's allowing him to not have so many decisions to make in the pocket, if that makes sense. He's not back there trying to do too much. He knows that he's limited on the ground, so he's really dialed in and focused on the passing game, and he's looking a little bit better. Now, he faced off against this same team back in Week 12, only had 129 yards passing, no touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 8 carries for 77. The Giants allow right around 18 fantasy points per game, but like I said, with this ankle injury, it's really improving his decision-making. The likes of Dallas Goedert getting a little bit more involved in this offense, which is good because he's not trying to spread the ball around too much. He's improving. Maybe this is what we need from Jalen Hurts, and this improvement in the passing game leads me to want to start him once again, because we still know that even though the rushing upside may not be what it was, it's still there, and we know that goal line opportunity will be there almost every single week for him. He's going to remain right here in the start column. Now we head over to Carolina for the Panthers and the Buccaneers, and Tom Brady was just shut out for the first time since 2006. Let that just soak in for a second. 2006. Plus, we know he lost Chris Godwin rest of season. Mike Evans is hurt. Playoff Lenny Leonard Fournette was just placed on the IR. This is not ideal by any means for Tom Brady. However, he could have back Antonio Brown this week to go along with Gronk, so he still has potential options in this offense. But Carolina, pretty tough against opposing quarterbacks, allowing right around 16 fantasy points per game, and they've only allowed over 200 yards passing one time over their last 7 games played. Now, Brady typically responds pretty well after a poor game. Had 0 touchdowns in week 4, came out in week 5, put up 411 yards and 5 touchdowns. Really can't count Tom Brady out. He's one of the greatest of all time for a reason. He's going to remain in the start column. For Carolina, Cam's going to have a large role, they said. And then they also came out and said Sam Darnold's going to be used in the offense as well. I mean, how much longer does this circus continue in Carolina? There's no style, there's no identity, there's no consistency to this offense. And then you look at the big picture, and Cam just finished quarterback 4 overall just last week in fantasy football. Now, a lot of that has to do with the rushing upside, and it's super risky to throw him into your fantasy line because he could really go out there, be benched halfway through the game, and score you like 6 points. There's questions in this offense every single week. Now, the matchup going up against Tampa Bay, they'll right around 19 fantasy points per game. 5th most in the NFL, but it's super hard to run on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. A lot easier to throw. Well, we're pretty reliant on Cam running, which sounds like a problem to me. I'm not going to chance it. He's going to be a sit this week. Down to Houston, though, for the Texans and the Chargers, and 2 totally different sides of the spectrum here. You got Davis Mills, who hasn't played horrible, but now he could be without Brandon Cooks here this week, and this isn't a time to get cute in fantasy football. You're not starting. No one is starting Davis Mills. Let's be realistic here. Now, for the Chargers, you never, ever sit Justin Herbert. Better believe I'm feeling fancy right now. The guy just continues to be a top 5 quarterback week in and week out. Now, he may be without Austin Eckler. We're kind of waiting to see if he's activated off the COVID IR or not this week, but he still has Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Jared Cook, plenty of options in this offense to go out there and have another multiple touchdown game. Plus, the matchup, not too bad. Houston allows right around 18 fantasy points per game. They're not horrible against the pass, but let's be honest. It's the Houston Texans, and we're definitely going to start Justin Herbert against them. But now we head up to Seattle for the Seahawks and the Bears, and Justin Fields is getting better. Have you been able to catch any film on Justin Fields as of late? The guy is actually growing in the passing game. Just had a season high in completed passes and pass attempts. Now, Chicago, they're very rarely winning, so they're always having to throw the ball, which is good for fantasy football purposes and Justin Fields. We know every single week the rushing upside is going to be there, and we're going to get a few bonus points there just in rushing alone. But now going against Seattle, who allows right around 18 fantasy points per game, with Fields gaining some momentum here late in the season, he's going to be a start for me this week. As for Russell Wilson, he's usually like a weekly start. Really, I mean, do we really ever question starting Russell Wilson when he's healthy? I mean, does he have Tyler Lockett back this week? We're getting word now that he was injured in the game this past week. However, he's not going to sit. He's playing through it. How much is that going to limit his play? They're still really not utilizing DK Metcalf very much. And, prior to last week, he started to look pretty good. I'm going to continue to list Russell Wilson as a start here this week. However, when the ranking shows come out, I'm going to drop him here a few spots to kind of account for some of this risk that's going to be kind of built in to this matchup. He may not be that smash start. The ceiling may be a little bit lower, and especially without knowing the status of Tyler Lockett, we kind of need to wait and see. As of right now, I'm assuming that Tyler Lockett is playing, and I'll start Russell Wilson. If Lockett is ruled out, though, honestly, this may be one of those weeks where I kind of look at other options. He's right there on the fence, so he's definitely somebody I'm paying close attention to here heading into the weekend. Now we head over to Kansas City for the Chiefs and the Steelers, and finally, we get games of back-to-back production for Patrick Mahomes. Do you realize we haven't had back-to-back solid games from him since weeks 5 and 6? That is absolutely mind-blowing to me. It just sounds crazy. So how is he going to be rewarded for that back-to-back production? He may not have Tyreek Hill or Travis Kelce, who have been placed on the COVID IR. Are they going to be activated in time? At the time of this recording, they have yet to be ruled out. So we're going to kind of wait and see, because if he does not have Hill or Kelce, that's severely going to limit whatever ceiling he could have had in this matchup. It's a lot easier to run on Pittsburgh than it is to throw on Pittsburgh. And if he doesn't have his top 2 passing weapons, that could be a problem. We're kind of going to monitor this throughout the weekend. Can you afford to sit him? Who else do you have available that could potentially be a better start? Because we know what he's capable of, but he needs somebody to really throw the ball to. So pay close attention to this situation and make sure he has his top options heading into the weekend. For Pittsburgh, you got Big Ben, who pulled a disappearing act once again this past week, right? He sucked us in like a tractor beam. He was, back-to-back games for Big Ben. He was looking pretty good. Killed us last week. He did this exact same thing between weeks 9 and 11. Almost identical. Back-to-back solid games. We gain a little bit of confidence. We throw him in the starting lineup, and he just gives you the finger to your fantasy team. It was not great for us, but now it's a matchup against the Kansas City Chiefs, who give up right around 20 fantasy points per game. That's 3rd most in the NFL. Now, if they don't have Kelsey and Hill, we could see Pittsburgh try to go out there and be a little bit aggressive and get a lead here early in the game and then try to rely on Najee late there to kind of run the ball and run the clock. They're playing on the road, which is not ideal for Big Ben. This back and forth scoring, honestly, in my opinion, I prefer to sit Big Ben here as of right now. The peaks and valleys are just too high and way too low. But now a trip out to Sin City. We got the Denver Broncos, Las Vegas Raiders, and no Teddy Bridgewater here this week. He's already been ruled out, which means we're going to have Drew Lock in his first start of the season. Now, don't get me wrong. Honestly, I kind of like Drew Lock. I think he kind of elevates the passing game. Sure, there's going to be some turnovers there. He's going to make some bad throws from time to time, but I believe the passing ceiling is a little bit higher with Drew Lock than it is with Teddy Bridgewater. He's more likely to go deeper down the field. He could easily go out there and put up 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. It wouldn't surprise me whatsoever, especially going up against the Raiders, who allow right around 19 fantasy points per game. Pretty good matchup. Now, no way is he safe in fantasy football. If you look at Drew Lock and say, he's a safe start this week, no, he is not. He is a huge gamble. If you got huevos the size of basketballs and you just want to go out there and show your league mates that you have the balls to make a gutsy call like this, it could really benefit you. However, in my opinion, I'm more excited to watch him play to see what he does in this passing offense than I am to throw him into my fantasy football lineup, so he's going to remain a sit. As for Derek Carr, the ceiling is just shrinking. Right now, if you look at Derek Carr's ceiling, you have to kind of, you can't even fully elevate your head. That ceiling is just shrinking every single week. He hasn't had a multiple touchdown game since week 10. No big plays in this offense. Everything is dink and dunk. Darren Waller hasn't been active, and now a matchup going up against Denver is a quarterback nightmare. They allow only 15.5 fantasy points per game, and they've only allowed over 200 yards passing one time over their last 5 games. Derek Carr just isn't showing us enough ceiling to want to throw him into our starting lineup when there's other safer options, in my opinion, here this week. So he's going to remain a sit. So now we head down to Big D, the Dallas Cowboys, Washington football team, and does Taylor Heineke return this week? The bigger question is, does it even matter? I don't think I'm going to start him regardless. He just played against this Dallas Cowboys defense 2 weeks ago, had 122 yards passing, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Terry McLaurin not overly involved in this offense. You can tell he's not 100% healthy. Limited scoring opportunities in this offense. Plus you have the whole Trayvon Diggs factor. I'm just going to sit Taylor Heineke if he's active. For Dallas, what has happened to Dak Prescott? This is a guy who every single week was going to go out there and put up 300 yards and 2 or 3 touchdowns, and now all of a sudden, he's not. He's had only 1 game over his last 5 played in which he's thrown for multiple touchdowns. In week 14, in this same matchup against Washington, he threw for 211 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. He hasn't thrown for over 300 yards now in 3 straight weeks. What is Mike McCarthy doing in this offense for the Dallas Cowboys? There is so much talent, so many weapons. Ezekiel Elliott, Tony Pollard, Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, Dalton Schultz. What is the problem? Why can we not get things going here in Dallas with that much talent? A matchup going up against this Washington football team should be ideal because they allow right around 24 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. That is the most in the NFL. I'm rolling the dice once again. I got to start Dak Prescott. The ceiling is just too high, and eventually he's going to have himself one of his ceiling games, and I want that to happen during the fantasy playoffs because he could definitely help win you your matchup here this week. But that only leaves us Monday Night Football, the Miami Dolphins, New Orleans Saints, the battle of two teams who allow right around 19 fantasy points per game or so to opposing quarterbacks. Tua, he continues to play solid football. He's not ever going to be one of those guys that goes out there and throws for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's not what he is. He's a game manager with touchdown upside. He has multiple touchdowns now in 3 of his last 4 games played, and he should get back Jalen Waddle. That's kind of the key piece for me right there. Plus, is Duke Johnson a new weapon in Miami? It looks like he could be, because Brian Flores just wants to be a little bit silly here the end of the season. So not a huge ceiling for Tua. However, the floor has remained pretty safe, and that's why I continue to have him in the start column. For New Orleans and Taysom Hill, he's really shown his floor the last couple weeks. No passing touchdowns over his last 2 games played, and now all of a sudden the rushing upside is starting to disappear a little bit as well. But this is not a bad matchup whatsoever. Taysom Hill is going to be a start for me this week, but in my opinion, this is about as risky as I could possibly get in week 16. The lack of consistency here over the last couple weeks is not ideal when it comes to your fantasy playoffs. We know this guy has a huge ceiling. We've seen it before, but we haven't really seen it lately. Like I said, I have him as a start in hopes that rushing upside returns, but he's about as risky as I'm willing to get here in week 16, so I'm going to have to drop him a few spots in my rankings by the time they come out here later today. All right, those are my starts and sits for the quarterback position here, week 16 fantasy football. Hopefully I was able to give you a little bit of information to help set your lineups. Don't forget our rankings shows will be out here shortly. I'm trying to get them out in the next couple hours so you have them before the Thursday night game. Trying to get all that content out as quick as we possibly can. Just a reminder, there's no injury show this week. We're just going to post some graphics on our community tab, so make sure you're subscribed with the bell notification on, so we'll get you all the last minute information there. Plus the tailgate show, I'm not going to do that on Christmas Eve and Christmas. Our guys need to spend some time with their family. Hit the like button if they need to hang out with their families here for a little bit towards the end of the season. But we will have a live show Sunday morning. Tao said he's going to go live right around 10:30, 11 o'clock or so make sure you stay tuned. Even though it should show members only, anybody can go there and watch it, right? So if you have other information you're looking for, make sure you check that out Sunday morning. Thank you so much for the support here throughout the year. We greatly appreciate it. Hopefully you and your family have yourself a very Merry Christmas and a happy holiday here over the next few days. Looking forward to kind of decompressing, watching some football, opening some presents. I mean, duh. Everybody likes to open presents, but hopefully you and your family have a great holiday season here. Looking forward to hanging out with you guys here remainder of the year. And don't forget, we don't go anywhere once the season is over, so do not unsubscribe. We're with you all year long, and we're looking forward to some great off-season content here in the coming weeks and months. So make sure you stay tuned to that, but hopefully you guys have a great rest of your day, a great week. We'll talk to you later.